Okay, so this critique is a really fascinating deep dive into the cultural analysis of the quote-unquote MAGA babe aesthetic.
It is. It starts with that Times of London piece by Poppy Sauer, and then really challenges her conclusions about, hypersexualism and traditionalism.
Yeah, it's a very robust submission, and the counter evidence you've gathered is just fantastic.
Absolutely, but I do think there are some clear opportunities here to really maximize the impact.
To sharpen it up.
Yeah, to tighten the focus and make sure every single thread is really serving that central thesis.
Right. And when we talk about maximizing impact, I think our first point really gets at the architecture of the piece itself.
The overall structure.
Exactly. The analysis makes a strong case, but it could be so much more coherent if it just maintained a laser focus on the central subject.
Which is the political and cultural meaning behind the MAGA aesthetic, what the clothes actually mean.
Yes.
And the strongest part of the submission, I think, is how it immediately refutes Sauerbrey's premise.
Oh, it's great. The whole contradiction between her calling the look unrepentantly sexy.
Right, versus the actual reality of it. This modest, almost imposing dress code.
Like the TuckerNuck Jackie dress.
That's such a clear, compelling piece of counter-evidence.
It is. But then, and this is the weakness, the analysis sort of loses that momentum. It pivots pretty hard into a critique of the out-of-touch nature of elite conservative women giving parenting advice.
Yeah, we get into this lengthy discussion about ideas like having children needs to limit your personal freedom whatsoever, or, defining life in these really strict seasons. That socioeconomic critique is interesting in its own right. It is. But it just takes up so much space, and it really pulls the reader away from the main goal.
Which is interpreting the political signals of the clothes.
Exactly. That tangent, engaging as it is, really dilutes the focus. So the suggestion is pretty direct.
Go on.
You either have to fully integrate that socioeconomic stuff back into the aesthetic argument. Have to directly explain why they choose the Jackie dress. Or
you just have to trim it way, way down.
Keep it extremely brief, almost marginal, because right now it feels like a detour.
I agree. That link needs to be explicit. So if you do keep that critique of the whole boss babe lifestyle, how can you make sure it's actually serving the analysis of the clothes?
Well, it needs to stop being a commentary on parenting philosophy, right? And it needs to become a commentary on professional necessity.
Okay.
And what's great is that the work already has this fantastic anchor point for it. You already noted that these women have to be far more masculine than most other women in their professions.
Ah, so you use that. You make the style not just about their political views, but about it being a functional tool for their careers.
Precisely. The clothing has to be analyzed as a kind of a visual armor.
I like that. Visual armor.
Yeah. So for some concrete examples, you could say, cut way down on detailing the privileged views on motherhood.
Right.
And instead, connect the style choice, the bright, jewel-toned colors, the really structured, imposing silhouettes, the high necklines. Connect all of that to the sheer necessity of surviving.
Surviving in that highly competitive, highly stressful, and highly aggressive masculine environment.
Yes, exactly. The whole world of politics and cable news. The argument then becomes that the clothing is a strategic device.
It's a uniform for a certain kind of battle. These women need to project this unshakable authority in rooms where, let's be honest, they're constantly being tested.
That's it. It's a visual tool to command presence, to assert authority in a male-dominated field. It's not just a fashion statement about how they raise their kids.
And those jeweled tones, they really demand attention in a sea of what, navy and gray suits?
It's calculated power dressing. And making that shift elevates the entire analysis from just a general cultural critique to a really targeted study of political professionalization.
That framing makes perfect sense. It really strengthens the whole piece. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about the conclusion of the original Sauerbrey.
The new punk rock idea?
Yeah, exactly. Let's look closely at that section. The idea that the MAGA look is the ultimate nonconformist.
Right. And this is where the analysis is so close to landing a major punch, but it pulls up a little short right now.
How so?
Well, the piece does a great job showing that the look is distinctive, that it's a form of tribal signposting, but it misses a huge opportunity to really leverage Sauerbrey's most provocative point about the nonconformity.
So the weakness is that it spends too much time refuting what the look isn't. It isn't really sexy, it isn't really tradwife.
Exactly. And not enough time deepening the analysis of what the look achieves. as a radical act of rebellion.
We're missing the context that makes it punk rock in the first place.
Yes, that's the crux of it. The nonconformity isn't just about the political view itself. It's about this specific visual rejection of the cultural norm in certain places.
And the source material specifically points to the East Village in New York.
Which is key context. Because in a place like the East Village, the so-called alternative style is actually the mainstream.
It's the dominant aesthetic.
That's the essential insight that needs a much sharper analytical lens. So the suggestion is to really sharpen the explanation of how this specific, hyper-polished aesthetic functions as a radical act.
Radical in an environment where the janky haircut and blue eyeshadow that Sauer wore is, well, it's the cultural uniform.
It is. It's the uniform for the educated professional elite in that context, so it completely flips the script. For concrete examples, the analysis should explicitly contrast the sort of perceived effortlessness of the alternative aesthetic.
Where being messy or anti-fashion is what's valued.
Yes. Contrast that with the highly polished, almost militarily structured look of the fluorescent blonde and jewel tones with the perfect barrel curls.
It's the difference between a style that says, I woke up like this, and one that screams, I spent 2 hours calculating this exact visual impact.
And that second one requires calculation. It requires time and money and a kind of intense self-discipline.
Which is completely counter to the accepted liberal urban norm that, prizes a certain kind of intellectual nonchalance over rigid presentation.
So you frame that polished femininity as requiring maximum effort, making it genuinely subversive in a culture that valorizes the casual. The choice to be intensely hyper-feminine and extremely put together, that becomes the radical act.
Especially when the politically acceptable feminine uniform in those places is defined by a sort of intentional edge or unkemptness.
That is a powerful distinction to make. The very act of being meticulously put together signals political rebellion because it rejects the cultural language of the dominant class in that space.
The effort itself is the rebellion.
And that reframes the whole aesthetic. It's not traditional anymore. It's intensely and strategically modern. It's using tradition as a weapon of nonconformity. That's what will make the new punk rock argument totally unassailable.
That's fantastic. Now let's pivot to a really crucial piece of evidence that you brought up, which I found absolutely fascinating.
TuckerNuck.
Yes, the corporate backstory of the brand TuckerNuck, the makers of the famous Jackie dress.
This is a gold mine. a gold mine of political and consumer irony that needs to be at the very center of the analysis, not just, presented as a fun fact.
The irony is it's so profound. TuckerNuck, the go-to brand for this whole aesthetic, is run by dyed-in-the-wool, Democrat wealthy elites.
Who donate to Act Blue.
Right. And for anyone who doesn't know, Act Blue is the main fundraising platform for the Democratic Party. So this isn't a small thing. It's a foundational ideological contradiction.
It is, but the submission right now, it sort of treats this finding as an interesting little aside.
Like a footnote.
Yeah, when it should be foundational to the entire critique of political branding and authenticity. That's the weakness here.
I see exactly where you're going. So the suggestion has to be to use this irony as the main analytical tool to talk about how performative political aesthetics have become in our consumer culture.
Right. The very look that signifies political purity for one side is in fact being manufactured and sold by the opposition.
It gives you this lens on commodified political identity that you almost never get to see so clearly. The analysis needs to argue that the uniform adopted by this movement, it's a commodity supplied and controlled by the very socioeconomic class they often rail against.
And what does that tell us?
It suggests this really complex tension where the consumer they're buying an identity, not creating an organic one.
Exactly. And that elevates the whole discussion from a simple fashion critique, do I like this dress, to a much deeper commentary on political consumerism, on branding, on the limits of authenticity. This is where you can really separate this analysis from all the other commentary out there.
It's such a powerful move. So, for concrete examples, how would you suggest framing this disconnect to really maximize its impact?
I think you have to frame it explicitly as an aspiration. This aesthetic, this Nantucket offshoot, it appeals to a certain ideal of American power and success, right?
Right.
But that ideal is literally being purchased from and is financially resented by liberal elites. This strengthens the point that the MAGA-babe style isn't some organic political statement. It's an adopted, commodified uniform of perceived power.
So the argument is that the whole style is a performance of power that relies entirely on the capital and infrastructure of the people they claim to reject.
It demonstrates how deeply intertwined politics and commerce have become, even when they seem like they're on opposite sides. And there's that fantastic quote you found to ground this.
From the anonymous TuckerNuck employees.
Yes. You have to highlight that quote about them being upset that they have to sell clothing to Republican women who they think are evil.
That tension is it's palpable.
It's not just in the donation records. It's right there in the physical supply chain. That raw political tension is the story that needs to be front and center.
By weaving that irony in so fully, the whole piece just gains this crucial layer of complexity. It shifts the focus from what do these women believe to what are they buying to signal that belief and who's selling it to them. That is a powerful reframing.
And it offers a really robust conclusion about the commercial limits of political nonconformity in the 21st century.
Okay, so what I really like about this whole critique is how specific your counter-evidence. I mean, the TuckerNuck dress, the specific colors, and that deep contextual understanding of these women operating in these high-stress masculine environments.
Those are absolutely the strongest foundations of the analysis.
Yeah.
And to maximize the impact, I think the actionable steps are really clear. First, maintain that surgical focus on the style analysis. Minimize the parenting advice tangent and reframe the clothing as professional armor.
Right.
Second, integrate that profound political irony of the TuckerNuck brand. Use its liberal founders and its Act Blue donations to make a really deep point about commodified political aesthetics.
And the consumer tension.
Exactly. And third, just deepen that explanation for why this hyper-polished look functions as the ultimate nonconformity in today's world. Highlight the sheer effort and calculation it requires, making the effort itself the act of rebellion.
If you take those steps to really strengthen the structural coherence and the analytical depth, I think the final piece is going to be even more robust. It'll move from being an excellent rebuttal to, really, a definitive analysis of political aesthetics in the modern age.
I completely agree.
We really look forward to seeing the revisions. Please send it back when you're ready.